join Cammy and me for dinner this evening? About 6. We eat early.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Great. Oh, Win, you mentioned that I could talk to someone about putting up my basketball hoop. Who was that again? Mr. Gogolak, was it?
All right, then, let's see. Basketball, hoop, and backboard. Portable. Nope, I'm sorry. It's not allowed.
You're kidding.
I'm afraid not. Rules are rules. It may not sound like anything, a simple basketball hoop, but from there, it's just a few short steps to spinning daisy reflectors and a bass boat in the driveway.
In other words, anarchy.
It may sound tough, but ours is a system that works. That's why the Falls is one of the top-ranked planned communities in all of California. Most of our homeowners have been here since day one.
So I was reflecting on the insanity of cancel culture, and I watched this old episode of the X-Files, which I thought really encapsulated the issue well. It's the 15th episode of the 6th season called Arcadia. So this fictional planned community exists in San Diego, California. The episode kicks off with a disgruntled homeowner who gets this whirligig decoration in a box in the mail that he sticks on his roof to annoy his neighbors. That night, a mysterious creature breaks into his house and kills him and his wife. So to solve this murder, Mulder and Scully go undercover as a married couple. And as they're moving in, a neighbor pushes Mulder's basketball hoop into the garage, saying, "It's against the community's CC&Rs," which is like a strict codes, conduct, and regulations that everyone is expected to follow. So as they're trying to discover the reason for the killings, Mulder decides to test his theories that non-compliance with the CC&Rs is the motive by sticking a plastic flamingo in the yard and damaging his mailbox, among other antics. Mulder later finds a note in the mailbox that says, quote, "Be like the others before it gets dark," and the mailbox is repaired. After dark, Mulder brings out his basketball hoop, and one of his neighbors runs over and tells him he has to get it put away. Meanwhile, Mulder sees the monster coming towards them underneath the grass, but manages to chase it away. The next day, they get lab results from what they thought was blood found at the scene, and it turns out just to be trash, and it is revealed that this neighborhood was actually built over an old landfill. Mulder believes the murdered family may have been buried in the front yard, and so the next day has a backhoe show up to dig up the front yard, telling the neighbors he's putting in a reflecting pool, which is not against the CC&Rs. They don't find the missing family, but they do find the tacky whirligig, and that windmill bears the mark of the company owned by Gogolak, the head of the homeowners association. Scully calls for a forensic team to come out immediately, and she hears something in the house. This creature comes up the stairs, and Scully manages to escape by hiding in a closet while a heroic neighbor fights with the creature. Meanwhile, outside, Mulder is confronting Gogolak about the Klein's death by giving them the tacky windmill, and he finds out that this creature is called a tulpa, or a Tibetan thought form, and is made of nothing more than the trash beneath this supposed utopia, and had been summoned by Gogolak to enforce the CC&Rs. Mulder arrests him and handcuffs him to a mailbox and goes to find Scully. While he's handcuffed to the mailbox, Gogolak begs for help, knowing that the creature is coming. This is because any deviation from at least the appearance of perfection anywhere in the neighborhood, even something as little as a burnt-out light bulb, is enough to call down the wrath of this creature. And so, handcuffed to the mailbox, the creature attacks Gogolak, and as he dies, the tulpa disintegrates back into trash.
Yeah, what did I do? Let's start with the Kleins. You're responsible for them being in little pieces in my front yard. You gave them that lawn ornament, the guy with the axe?
Whirligig.
Yeah, whirligig. It's tacky enough to break your rules and your CCRs. Tacky enough to mark the Kleins for death.
That sounds good in a court of law. When the judge asks you who killed the Kleins, what exactly are you going to tell him?
It's a Tibetan thought form. It's a living, breathing creature willed into existence by someone who possesses that ability. An ability I think you picked up on your whirligig buying excursions to the Far East. Why'd you do it? I mean, is it so damn important for everybody to have the same color mailbox?
It's important that people fit in.
She didn't know exactly what you were getting into, did you? I mean, you can summon its existence, but you can give it life, but you can't control it. The best you can hope for is to stay out of its way.
And I thought that this whole story arc was really a good analogy for what we're seeing today. There's these people and they really wanted to live in the perfect world, the Utopia, but it had been built on top of trash. Now in this episode it's built on literal trash, but we see people trying to construct a utopia out there in the real world today based on ideas that are also trash. Ideas that have been disproven, ideas that have been tried and failed, ideas that have led to the greatest human disasters in all of history. But they keep trying to force it. They keep trying to force it to make it work. And the more that this idea gets disproven that it doesn't work, the more force people try to use to implement it. And it's interesting, this show was popular in the early to mid 90s, and that marks the time period shortly after the collapse of East Germany and the former USSR, where we saw with perfect clarity the collapse of top-down centralized forms of government. So if you imagine how this started out, there was probably a neighbor that didn't mow his lawn, and they thought, we just want to live in a nice community where everyone's lawn is mowed. And so they have these CCNRs, and the people don't follow it. And it's like, okay, we're going to have to start using force, and there's going to be no appeal, and there's going to be no judge, no jury, just an executioner. And so they get rid of the one problematic family. Well, then there's another family, and they're problematic too. They might mow their lawn, but maybe they don't paint the house. And so the goalposts keep moving. But the thing is, the people living in this utopia, they want to live in the perfect neighborhood, so they will this monster into existence. Initially, they're in favor of the monster. They think they can keep complying. They think they'll be safe. They think that it will never come for them. And then by the time it's out of control, to the point where even a burnt-out light bulb in the middle of the night is cause for panic because it's going to summon this creature who's just going to finish them off. And so think about that. Here you start wanting to live in this utopia, but it's not based on any reasonable method of resolving problems. It only relies on the use of force and intimidation. There's no chance for redemption. There's no chance for appeal. There's no chance for correction. It's simply be perfect or else. And unfortunately, here in the real world, the creators of the monster, if they're destroyed by it, we're not rid of the monster. It's like Pandora's box. Once you let it out, we're all stuck with it. And I thought this was pretty funny. You've probably seen it. There's a lot of these boomer and Gen X, somewhat older liberals that they've been riding this trash monster of selective cherry-picked outrage for a long time. Most notably J.K. Rowling. You remember she accused Donald Trump of ignoring a handicapped child because he was grossed out by the handicappedness. And then you got the full context of the meeting, and it was like, no, that was fake news. They selectively edited it, and she wouldn't apologize. She wanted to judge. She wanted to have this utopia. Now, it's not the utopia of Arcadia. The leftist utopia, it's almost an inversion of the values you would see in Arcadia. But just taking the ideas, say, of an Arcadia and inverting them doesn't create a utopia either. It's still just another rigid, strict standard that doesn't exist through negotiation or reason, but only through the application of force. And so for a long time, people like J.K. Rowling were riding this wave, almost surfing on this energy thought form tulpa monster, using it to cancel their opponents rather than providing actual arguments, simply saying, he's intolerant, get rid of him, intolerant, bad, orange man, bad. Now you have them realizing that the monster's not going to stop once you've cut it loose. Now it's starting to come for them, and now they see the light, so to speak. So you have them coming out. We have J.K. Rowling joins Margaret Atwood, Salman Rushdie, Noam Chomsky, and Martin Amis among 150 authors and academics in call to defend free speech after Harry Potter creator suffered a barrage of abuse for voicing views on trans issues. So, the monster she helped create, that she cut loose, that she thought she could control, the goalposts have now moved beyond where she is comfortable having them be, and now the monster's coming for her. Open Letter warns the lifeblood of society is daily becoming more constricted. It's like the CC&Rs. They have to keep tamping down because it's like, well, we're not at the Utopia yet. Better move the goalposts further. Well, we're not at the Utopia yet. And you can see Rowling has been slammed by the Harry Potter stars themselves. Like, they want to keep having these careers in Hollywood. They want to keep getting roles. They want to continue to surf the wave. And they haven't hit a point where they're like, whoa, too far. And I just want to point out, people don't virtue signal down. They are always virtue signaling up. So when these celebrities come out in support of certain causes, it's not for their fans. It's not for the little guy. It's not for the electrician or the janitor. They're trying to signal up to the people that choose what roles they get, that control the money and power above them, not below. And so it's either just a method of signaling your submission or begging for a reward. Now, her problem was she didn't want to let go of the identity of being a woman. This is originally where the CCRs stopped, and they could say, you're anti-woman, you're anti-woman. Well, if you get rid of the idea of woman, all of a sudden, she woke up one day to find out she no longer could control the monster. And look at the underlying tension. Rowling told the BBC there are a lot of writers, artists, and journalists who are afraid of approaching certain subjects, afraid of crossing lines, or even lacking sufficient zeal for particular subjects because they're afraid of their peers. Oh, great, in the attempt to set up a utopia, you set up a totalitarian state where there is no diversity of thought allowed. So instead of living in the utopia, we find ourselves living in hell. It's funny to see people get real smart real fast when the monster then comes to them. The letter published in Harper's calls for the free exchange of information and ideas. The lifeblood of a liberal society is daily becoming more constricted and demands that they want to uphold the value of robust and even caustic counter-speech from all quarters. It later adds, it is now all too common to hear calls for swift and severe retribution in response to perceived transgressions of speech and thought. Oh, now you're for free speech. Tell that to Jack Dorsey on Twitter. And J.K. Rowling's horrendous, unforgivable crime is for claiming that men cannot change into women. Rowling said that online trolls had abused her with hideous language, calling her bad names, and said she deserved punching and death. Here's the monster. Here's the monster made of trash. And yet, in an even greater irony, you can see here, fearing cancellation, public figures withdraw support for Open Letter decrying cancel culture. And here you can see the self-cannibalization of the far left as they fight over the top position on the grievance totem pole. And this is because of Rowling's positions. You can see here a tweet from Jennifer Finney Boylan. I did not know who else had signed that letter. I thought I was endorsing a well-meaning, if vague, message against internet shaming. I did know Chomsky, Steinem, and Atwood were in, I thought, good company. The consequences are mine to bear. I'm so sorry, monster. Don't eat me. And you can see here their appeal to free speech wasn't really about that. It was about trying to regain control of the monster. And this is why I say there's two kinds of people out there. There are seekers of truth, and there are servants of power. Now, seekers of truth can disagree wildly, but what they can agree on is no matter how different their views are, they can discuss and disagree and talk to one another and respect one another. They are seekers of truth. Now, servants of power, they want control, they want to rule, and Everything is just a veiled technique to get power and control over other people. And of course, it's kind of like the analogy of the One Ring. Nobody can actually wield it. I love that story at the beginning of The Lord of the Rings with Isildur. He cuts the Ring of Power off and he claims it for his own. He can't destroy it. And for a while, it serves him. For a while, he is able to use it. But then there's that moment where he's under attack and he goes to put on the ring, just like he always has, and it slips off his finger. And away it goes. And it's gone forever. And this is what has happened to people like J.K. Rowling. She found herself with tremendous power there in the early 2000s era, and she wasn't a seeker of truth. She wasn't willing to stand up for principle. It was just a matter of convenience, because why? Why focus on truth when the ring is seemingly obeying your every command? And then all of a sudden it slips off of your finger when you need it most, and you're reduced to this pathetic, groveling, and contemptible creature, pining away for the heyday, the glory days, when you had that ring, when you had that power. And you can see this attempt to get it back, but the way it works is you never get it back. This is the reward of serving power. It uses you up and it spits you out. And so to build a better world, we really have only one decision, and that is to seek the truth. That means everybody gets to speak, everybody gets to have their turn, and there is no censorship. I mean, think about it. You can't even have a relationship with one other person unless that relationship is based on honesty and truth. I mean, you can't even have a relationship with yourself unless it's based on self-honesty. That's where addiction comes from. Self-deception, self-indulgence. So how do you plan to build a utopia based on a web of lies? How do you plan to build a utopia on trash? You can't. Think about it like building a bridge. I had a roommate in college that was an engineer. He was an incredible mathematician. Me, not so much. If I were to design a bridge and I say, well, I like the look of this bridge, it looks really cool. And he says, well, my bridge is mathematically sound and it may not look as attractive, but it will hold traffic. Well, we have to seek the truth. We can't just serve some political end or, well, my brother-in-law is going to build my bridge and we're going to get a contract, or whatever. But the bridge won't work. If we don't do the math right, if we don't seek truth, you don't get a functional outcome. And then you got to keep suppressing all the people that are pointing out, the emperor has no clothes or the bridge isn't working. The bridge is going to collapse. People are going to get hurt. You go, no, but I really, really want the bridge to work. I really want my math to be right. And so you have to start suppressing people that criticize your math. This is why they censor, because they can't answer the criticisms. They can't respond, or they would. You can either seek truth or you can serve power. And if you choose to serve power, don't be surprised if you find yourself living in the utopia built on trash.
Several residents of the Falls have now come forward to blame the deaths in the neighborhood on Homeowner Association President Gene Gobelak. These same residents deny Agent Mulder's allegation that they were in some sense all responsible for the demise of Gobelak himself, claiming ignorance as to what actually killed him. It would seem the code of silence that hid the sins of this community has not only survived, but in its creator claimed a final victim. Meanwhile, the Falls at Arcadia has been named one of the top planned communities in California for the 6th year running.
I miss the 90s. Back when even liberals believed in conspiracy theories.